do the work.
I
That's
have,
what
I have a question, because this is the thing of acknowledging our humanness. What was driving you when you were doing this? And what would you say to yourself now if you could go back?
That's a deep question. Honestly, I didn't want to lose a beat. I didn't want to lose pace. I wanted to keep up, right? So it's like you've fallen off of the treadmill, and you're like, you know what? I must get back on this treadmill immediately. Like, there is no question, there's no reflecting, there's no, is that the right treadmill for me? It's like, I'm going to get back on this treadmill because I was born to be on this treadmill. I thrive on this treadmill. I'm a winner. Let's do this. And I just wanted to just jump right back on it. And like in the process of jumping back on it, I lost a leg. I got blinded by one eye. My arm is hanging off, but I'm like, I'm on this, baby. Let's do this,
So, one-legged, one-eyed, but still running on the treadmill.
Full pelt. Full pelt. Like I'm Serena Williams training for Wimbledon. Like I was like gunning it with one leg, just hopping. And at the end of the day, what did I accomplish? That's the thing that I think I keep coming back. It's like, it's this false sense of progress. And really, at the core of it was this identity question of like, I just was so wrapped up in my sense of what I deliver, how I solve problems, how I help others, that if I'm not in a position where I can use my gifts and skills to solve problems and help others, then what is my value?
What is my value? That's a tough one. Thank you so much for being so raw and honest. And what would you go back and say to yourself now?
Your value is infinite, and it has nothing to do with what you produce.
Are you ready to dive deep into meaningful discussions, explore personal stories, and gain practical insights that can transform your approach to mental fitness? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Real Talk Mental Fitness Podcast, where open conversation and authentic connections come together to empower your mental well-being. I'm your host, Chinazom, and I'm so excited to have you here with us today. Live recording coming to you. We are very excited to start sharing and building up the excitement for thriving chaos. So we thought, what better way to start the excitement than to start talking about what we're going to be talking about during the day. So me and Ije had the idea to let's jump on and let's just start sharing with you of what you're going to expect. Ije, how excited are you?
Oh my goodness, I'm beyond excited. To say that I'm excited is actually an understatement. I'm brimming with joy at this point in time because this topic is so timely and so relevant. And you know what? So important.
This topic has been coming up in both our coaching practices over the last year, and also something that impacted both of us personally over the last 18 months. So we can't wait to dive in and just let's see what comes from this discussion, and we hope it lands with all of you. All right. Who's going to go first?
It feels like this is like an early gift to ourselves, really.
Yeah.
I would love to hear from you because of your expertise, your deep training, and your experience in mental fitness and performance psychology, right? When we talk about staff reduction, reorganization, what are some of the impacts on leaders as individuals? That's where I'd love to start.
Okay. Yeah, so that's a great question because I've been thinking over the last year, what have I been seeing with all the leaders I've been coaching? And the word that came out of me is trauma, psychological trauma. It didn't hit me until I started, trying to process all these leaders I've been coaching it's actually been a traumatic experience because your job, whether you like it or not, is linked to your survival. And when your survival is put in question, trauma is the only word I can put to it. Because when all of a sudden you start questioning whether have I got money coming in to take care of my family, to pay all the bills. And also a lot of people where I've coached in companies, they actually, you've heard the term Amazonians or Googlers, or your identity is tied into that. So when all of a sudden your identity is also put into question, your status, it causes trauma. Whether no other way to put it, it causes trauma. And what happens is your reptilian brain steps in and takes control. Whoever leader you are, you're a human being. And when your reptilian brain steps over and takes control, psychological safety walks out, just packs its bags and walks out. So now when you don't have psychological safety, as well as the trauma, you now have this vacuum, which if there's a vacuum and there's uncertainty, then the reptilian brain is going to start creating scenarios and ideas, and it fills it with whatever comes to mind. So I see a lot of leaders where they're suffering from this trauma. I don't know whether they've acknowledged it, but they are suffering from this trauma.
It's interesting to hear you say the word trauma, because even though I have kind of walked alongside you over the past 18 months and I've had my own lived experience of this, I struggle with the word trauma. It's almost like I want to push back against it. I don't want to accept it. I want to kind of minimize it or dilute it because it seems like such a big word, such a loaded word, trauma, that we're typically associating with, folks coming back from war and, retransitioning into civilian life, or you've experienced some other sort of near death experience, and that has a mark on you, or if you're grieving the loss of someone or something. But as I'm hearing you like describe the psychological safety walking out the door, trauma is the accurate description of what I felt when I was in that situation myself. And I wonder what would be possible if we could acknowledge that more and accept that.
And the reason I came up with the word trauma, and you're right, there's all different levels of trauma, because going to war is completely different, or losing a loved one, which happened to me, is different to this kind of trauma, but it's still trauma. And the reason I came up with the trauma was I was coaching people where they had these stress related illnesses. I think one's called osteocolitis. I may not be pronouncing it correctly, osteocolitis, but something, it all usually comes in the gut. And now there are a lot of these people where they're having these stress illnesses that are actually attacking their immune system. So that's when it hit me that, oh my God, your body has been in such a state of fight, flight, or freeze. It's now not just breaking down. You've now created a disease that's attacking your own immune system. So that's where the word trauma came to me, was because I was like, this is just not normal. You're not meant to be now suffering from an illness. And this illness, I was shocked to hear that once you have it for life. So I was like, no job is worth having that kind of illness from it.
That's definitely not something that gets disclosed to you when you're doing your physical for a new role. Okay. No one is mentioning that a potential side effect could be, this physiological manifestation of the psychological burden of that stress, stress over an extended period of time. And it's so fascinating to hear you say like it manifests physically. So you actually feel the pain in your body, and maybe others can even observe a mark changing you physically, as well as having to manage that condition over an extended period of time. It's in the case of what you just described, forever.
And also, I just realized with your question, another thing I didn't answer is where some people don't want to acknowledge it as trauma, because when you say, I've suffered from trauma, it's almost like there's something wrong with you, or you're a victim. And that's why I think people sweep it under the carpet, because a lot of the times with these psychological things, because you can't see it, you just carry on, and then you're just like, okay, just suck it up, move it to the side. But when you actually can acknowledge it and you can accept it, then I feel like that empowers you to actually, okay, let me accept it, let me heal from it. Now what do I do?
And this is such a great point around sort of the emotions that come up and are very, very real. And you want to sweep it under the rug. Like you mentioned that you don't want to be seen as a victim. So it's also like you don't want to be perceived as one, and you don't want to see yourself as a victim.
100%.
And I think this ties back. So it's so important. I'd love to cycle through the different emotions that can come up as a result of having your role eliminated or having your responsibilities redesigned so extensively that you're just at a loss, right? It's like you're in a completely different role. But so I want to come back to the emotions that tie to that change, that unexpected change, the abruptness of that, and the totality of that change. But before I come to that concept of identity, I know is one that keeps coming up in our work supporting high performing leaders and for ourselves. I can say for myself, my lived experience is absolutely, I have been focused for so long on aligning my work, my sense of fulfillment, my sense of purpose with, the roles that I'm actually playing in an organization.
Mm.
And that was a path to happiness, right?
Mm.
To high performance, to success in that role. Like it was so clear to me very early on that if I really want to enjoy my work, I have to be doing work that is meaningful, that has value in the environment that I'm in, and that aligns with my strengths and my interests, because that's what allows me to deliver effortlessly and consistently over an extended period of time. So that brand of high performer, problem solver, solution provider, the person that delivers is so embedded in my sense of how I contribute to the world around me, how I make sense of the world around me. And so when you take that very nuanced, deeply ingrained sense of identity and you look at the core source of that coming from your work, it allows you to start to understand some of those psychological impacts that can happen and that trauma that you're describing as a result of that loss of control, that loss of link to that work.
Yeah, and then let me think also as well, when you're a leader, a lot of that trauma is your leadership identity has been built around that. And you're supposed to be this strong person who knows the answers, who's going to set the vision for everybody but think about some of the people who I was coaching where a lot they're senior VPs, but then they see all the other senior VPs around them get laid off. So then all of a sudden you thought I was at this level where I should have the crystal ball, I should be making the decisions, but you see everyone around you get laid off. I hate to use this word, but somebody said it like, I see everyone around me get whacked. It's very hard for you to not deeply inside start to have that human fear and that, oh my days, am I next? This can happen to me.
Because it can. Yeah.
But you still have this identity. Whereas I think a lot of the times the leaders are, you're feeling this sin inside, but the image that you have to put outside can't show that. And I think that's something that gets in the way of you accepting or calling out that this was traumatic, because you don't even have time to process it, because your outward identity is like, you've got to now step up and show the vision. You've got to show that you're in charge, or you're strong, or you're whatever, fill in the blanks for that.
That one hit me hard, actually, because it actually takes me back. And the concept of strong leadership. Strong leadership has been so defined, at least from my perspective, my training, my experience, as the person who can weather all circumstances. Right?
Yeah.
Like resilient beyond, with a capital R, like you can weather anything that comes your way in anything, whether or not you were in the know. Like at a split notice, you snap your finger, we were going due north and now we're going due south. You pivot immediately and with precision and march in the new direction. And that was that was what strong leadership means, at least for me. As I was coming up, it's like that sense of that ability to go beyond what is imaginable, to embody that and model that for other leaders on your teams, right? So this point you're making around that parallel process, as we as coaches call it, where you're having to be that face for your leaders because it's such a core part of what it means to be a good leader. And you're also experiencing the same change, the same impact as a human, is really where it gets so
mind-blowing, isn't it? But and I love where you're going with this, because we all grew up with what it means to be a strong leader. And as you were saying that, what came to mind with me was like all the military leaders, like Napoleon or Julius Caesar, where those guys in the heat of the battle, they always had the answer. They always know what to do. So almost so that they're not human, they're gods.
Yeah, demigods. Yeah,
they're gods.
Yeah.
Emperor Napoleon made himself an emperor. But that's why I get so upset with the definition of resilience, because I found before the pandemic, resilience was always strong, always great, always had it together. And I also get upset with executive presence. I'm like, what does that word mean, executive presence? Like, you're not even allowed to be human. In any situation, you always have executive presence. And I think that's where we have to start redefining what it means to be a leader. Because I want my leader to be human first. And I understand that you're going to get your ass handed to you. You're going to be scared. But by showing that vulnerability, I don't expect you to be Superman. I expect you to be able to show that vulnerability and own your humanness. And then, all right, step up. What are you going to do about it? But to start coming across as a god, to me, I think that's very worrying if those kind of people are leading us, because I hope we've learned from history that no human being is a god.
Well, like this point about bringing the human side to good leadership, the definition of good leadership, is so interesting to me. And I want us to dive into that a little bit more, like practically, like what does that mean? Because I know that, when I was in a people leader role and I'm running multiple teams, there's so many factors at play at any given moment, right? You're managing down, you're managing sideways to your peers, you're managing up.
You're a therapist, you're a team coach,
you're a mentor.
Yeah, you're a mentor, you're HR.
You're a work wife or a work husband.
You're a trainer. Yeah. All the above.
So many roles, so many hats that you're wearing concurrently. And then you're on a train that's moving at breakneck speed, where, decisions are coming fast and furious, right? The goalpost is shifting, particularly in the last 18 months that we've been talking about. This is constant transition and rapid change and uncertainty, unprecedented levels of uncertainty.
That we've never seen before, because with AI, things are changing every two to 3 months. Everything's changing,
and we're just getting started, right? We're just getting started, right? So it's all of those factors, and you're trying to navigate all of that at the same time. You're trying to navigate what's going on within yourself as a human being, because you're also experiencing the change and trying to make sense of it for yourself as well. And so I think I want to get into, like, what does it look like practically to be human with all of those factors at play? What's an example of how a leader would show up and tap into the human side of things in this environment that we're describing, this layoff, reorg environment?
So some examples that come to mind from my coaching practices, when these leaders that were going through all this, where you see all your peers get laid off, but you're still there, and then you try to organize the team, and you do 4 or 5 months later, another layoff, another change. You try to do the same again to the team. 4 or 5 months later, again, another layoff. And I saw this with this particular leader, where they didn't even have the chance to acknowledge that this also happened to you. This trauma happened to you as well. You've been living with this fear and this anxiety. And then this leader was like, I just need a break. I need a break. But you can't go on holiday. Where are you going to go on? Who are you going to pass the work to?
Yeah.
So you couldn't take the break. And then you're playing all these multiple roles where you're being the therapist, you're being the coach for these members, you're being the work husband or work wife, you're being the performance, and you just haven't had that chance to even heal yourself. And this is a particular example. This is to remind us that we're human. This particular leader had one of their team members absolutely lose it on them because the work was too much.
Oh, yes.
But what the leader didn't realize was that person was also having family issues. Remembering that person's family was going through surgery. They didn't even know about this, which shocked the leader at the time. How did I not even pick this up? Because in all your one-to-ones and meetings, you had so much work to get done. So you were just trying to get the work done. And that person, as I said, when psychological safety walks out the window, that person did not feel like I could share that this was going on because I don't want to be next. I don't want to be on the chopping board. So they were just trying to like keep pushing. And then it was too much. So this leader is now taken aback that, oh my God, how did I not see the signs? Why does this person lost it? What does it mean about my leadership? And then on top of that, this leader is also struggling. They haven't had a break for nearly 18 months. They try and go on holiday, but they're having to take calls while they're on holiday because there's nobody else to do the work. So it's like this leader, before you can even be a leader, you have to acknowledge that you haven't even healed from your trauma and your suffering and all this constant change of you reinvent yourself. 6 months later, you got to reinvent yourself again. So this is where it's like acknowledging you're a human being first. You've got to heal yourself first and carve out that time to acknowledge and accept and process. And then you can probably try to step back in and start being a human to the other humans in your team who are also going through all this.
It sounds like you're acknowledging it to yourself first so that you can create space for you to be human, because you are, first and foremost. You're an impeccable leader, but you're a human first. And then you're almost acknowledging it for your team as well, for the leaders on your team, so that they remember that you're human as well. And they can, hold expectations with some grace, right? What they expect from you in this moment. And also to invite them and to model for them how you hope that they will share with you as well, so that you can continue to be reminded of all the other things that they are juggling in their real life, both in terms of direct, knock-on effect from the work, but also other things happening in their personal life as well, and making room for that. So it really does seem like, I love what you're saying, because it's like the acknowledgement is the first and foremost, because if you don't name something or call it out, it doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned.
And right? If it doesn't exist, it's controlling you in the background.
Right. Okay.
So it's there driving the wheels and pushing you in the background because you haven't called it out. You don't know why you're doing what you're doing. Or like this leader example, you don't know why this person is just blowing it up in your face. But if you had called it out, then you'd kind of see, oh, this is what happened to us. This is how we ended up here. This is why this happened.
You know what? But like logically, and we know this to be true because we're both deeply trained in this and we have lived experience. We know that acknowledging, saying it out loud, allows you to recognize that it exists, allows you to be more mindful and intentional and strategic in how you navigate its influence over you, right? Your behaviors and your words, etc. But why is it so hard to acknowledge it out loud?
This is a great question, Ije. Why? So I have to put this one back on you. Why is it so hard? Because it's scary. In the middle of like, it's okay now we're sitting here talking about this, but we lived through this experience, and I'm coaching hundreds of people through this. It's scary. You don't want to acknowledge it because you don't know if you're going to make it through. What does it mean? Who am I now if I don't have this identity or this job? So it's very, very scary.
I liken it to looking under the bed and looking the boogeyman in the eyes, like
opening the wardrobe to look at the monster. How big are you? Oh, okay.
That it's probably not real, but just a slight chance, that like less than 1% chance that something could pop out at you. And that then fuels the imagination, particularly if it's very, very dark. and you start to see shapes and you see movements and you're sensing things and all of this stuff. I mean, we make fun of it. Children experience this certainly as they're kind of maturing and becoming, a bit older, going into middle school, etc. But even as adults, I think we experience this because you're right. That's why it's so scary to call it out, to acknowledge that, hey, I'm human, you're human, we're all human. We don't know what's happening right now. We're doing the best that we can. It's scary because it means you have to look that in the eye and acknowledge that you're not in control of it all.
Yeah. And that's when the reptilian brain just takes charge. It's true what you said, like if the reptilian brain takes charge and you have to actually open that door and you don't know what the boogeyman looks like or how big is it, or is it going to have claws? Is it going to have horns? Is it going to breathe fire? We don't know. So the reptilian brain is just going to fill the vacuum with whatever stories. So that is where the fear really comes. And that's where you're like, oh, okay. Ooh, I don't know if I want to acknowledge that. Let's bury that deep down. Let's bury that deep down and let's carry on. Let's, we know the way. Let's carve on. Let's do what we did before. Where are the processes? Bring out the processes. And it's easier to do that.
Bring out the tech and
yeah.
I want to mention something else. That's another element of why, because you asked me, why did you hesitate as well when you were in that position? And I have to keep coming back to my lived experience because that's been the greatest teaching of my adult life. And another factor is not being sure how others will react, whether you can count on them. Because just as you're going through this incredibly traumatic experience and you're trying to navigate it and be this leader for your team and the leaders on your team, they are too. And so you don't know how they're going to react. You don't know where their mind is at. You don't know if you can count on them. And you don't want to put anything else on anyone else's plate. There's sometimes there's an extra burden that comes from unburdening yourself. Like we hear that concept of, if you really feel badly about something, keep it to yourself forever because it will eat you up, right? When you share it out loud and put it into the universe, you've unburdened yourself. Like you've freed yourself of that burden. And it's almost as if there's this very delicate balance where you're aware that some folks are really hanging by a thread, as you may be or may have been. And you're vacillating. It's up and down, just depends on the day. And you don't want to add anything else onto anybody's emotional plate. And so you kind of just bear it down, you push it down, and you just kind of suffer in silence. But what I found is that then makes you feel even more isolated and alone than you actually need to be.
I'm coming back to my lived experience, and I love that you shared this as well. And your lived experience has actually triggered back because I'm going back to when this happened to me. And luckily, I had a coach at the time. And my coach was like, okay, because we kind of saw this coming. So he was like, this has happened. I need you to take a week to go and do whatever you need to do, scream, shout, whatever you need to do, break something to say that this was really upsetting and why did this happen to me? And then after that, you come back and you start getting down to what's in your control. Because I think at the time it's like, if you get into the victim mindset, you have to acknowledge it, but he didn't want me to get into the victim mindset because something is always in your control. And I love that he said that because at the time when I left the company I was working at, I got amazing messages of, oh, so sorry this has happened. And I didn't respond to a single message. And he said, and I said this to him and he said, yeah, because, what has happened? Because luckily for me, I was already thinking, I saw the writing on the wall and I saw what's happening in the economy. And I was like, okay, I need to start growing my business, my brand, what's in my control. And that was in my control. So what I think he was this hasn't changed anything. Now it just means that you have more clarity. So instead of becoming a victim, focus on what's in your control. Now, what's very strange is about maybe a month ago, I then started going back to those messages and responding to the people. And I felt like maybe that was enough time for me to feel like, okay, I've focused on what I needed to get done, and I'm now seeing some traction. So now I can go back and respond and connect. But for some reason, my intuition told me at that time, if I start wallowing, or I call it wallowing, because if I start saying, "Oh, poor me," yeah, that would have taken my energy in the wrong direction. But I did spend a week to really sit with my emotions. I sat with my emotions. I was angry. I mourned this loss of this identity, and I let that happen. But I don't know why I chose a week. I'm not sure why I came up with that. It was an arbitrary thing, but I just felt like that was enough for me at that period in time to then say, okay, now get back on there.
Okay, I'm just gonna call. If you're listening right now and you heard Chinazom say that he mourned his transition for a week, just know that that is not the norm. Okay, I don't want anyone listening to this call to think, right, 7 days, I'm done. That's me done.
Yeah.
Because he's deeply trained in this, and and this is your work. Like, you're an expert in holding space and helping other leaders navigate this very same transition. So of course you had all of the habits embedded in you to help you, kind of quickly.
And I like that you called that out, because when I'm saying a week, it wasn't really a week, because I kind of knew this was already happening 8 to 9 months beforehand. Hence why I wrote a book. I started focusing on my business. I was already taking all the steps at least 8 months beforehand. And also in the work that I do as a coach, that is part of my mourning. I didn't realize this, but when I get to like share my lived experience and listen to other people's lived experience almost every week, I'm basically getting it out of my system, which I don't think a lot of other people do. So please, yeah, thank you for calling that out. I'm not saying go and take 7 days. I'm just telling you what I did in that situation. But my process started a long time before that. It just so happened that I was lucky to have seen it, and I'd already started the ball rolling. And I think what my coach was trying to do is, where does your energy need to go after you've done this acknowledgement and acceptance? And I think that's a big thing for people.
I love that point. And by the way, I know that I was just stating it for the record. Obviously, I know that, you're not saying that everyone has the same experience, because everyone's experience is unique. But a couple of things jumped out from what you said to me. Number one was how personalized your strategy was. Like, you leveraged your understanding of yourself, the things that are triggers for you, the things that provide you support, what you thought you could handle emotionally and mentally and spiritually at the time, and used all of that insight to determine your strategy for how you would navigate that period. And for you, it was, I'm not going to look at this until. And when you reached that until, you went back into that environment and reconnected. And that made so much sense. I did something similar. I wasn't as intentional or about it. And I certainly did not take a week. As you know, I definitely cried into my glass of wine for several months.
Oh, I actually remember you just dived into more work. I've got to.
I did. I dived in. That's my remedy. That's my go-to. It's like, oh, what's the reaction when something goes wrong? Just take on more really challenging work. In fact, go for the most challenging thing you can find and dive fully into it, and just tackle it and just get involved. And that's what saved me. But the point is that everybody has a different thing that will be their solution. And it starts from acknowledging that, not benchmarking or comparing yourself to anyone, because that's not helpful in almost anything, but especially not in this case. And then also giving yourself some grace as well. Like, you might pick a strategy and start working in that direction, and then it doesn't work out for you. It's not working. And so then go back to the drawing board, try something different. I think that's really important. And also, I want to acknowledge the fact that you not going to engage with folks, even though they reached out to you, wasn't because you felt they had ill intentions. I'm assuming, because I know it's really because, you were focused on what you can handle at the time. And I'm recognizing that when you engage with someone, you can't control how they react to you. So they might be trying to be of help to you and actually make the situation worse. So, it's really about actually acknowledging that, all right, this may not go the way that I played it out in my mind. Am I ready to deal with that if it doesn't? And if the answer is I'm not sure, pause on it.
And I love that you said that because this all comes back into mental fitness. And when I say mental fitness, I'm not talking about mental health and mental well-being. I'm talking about what do you need to do to show up and give your best when it matters the most. And in this situation, that's why I said, where does my energy need to go? So I was really already at that time focused on, okay, I need to grow my business now even more. So my energy needs to go there. And I'd already started learning about my mental fitness and what I needed to do. So it's almost like my coach knew that I needed that week to go and process and grieve or whatever was needed. But then I needed to really manage my emotional energy tank because I knew I had to give. You've heard that saying, do less with more. I knew I had to give. I need to operate at such a high level. So I was like, right, I need to make sure that my rest was on top, was really good. My recovery was really good. My rejuvenation was really good, so that my energy was going to be able to sustain me for the big push, which it took about a year. But so I was really focused on my mental fitness game, and that's where the strategy probably came from. Was like, this is where your energy needs to go now. And the people who reached out when I was ready, I went back and I reached back out to them. But at that point in time, that wouldn't have served me at that point in time because I already knew that the energy tank was probably in a fragile state, and whatever was there, I needed to really take care of it and use it in the best way.
I love this point that you made. And, it just also first of all, your energy management system is incredible. And for those of you who are not familiar with Chinazom's energy management system, I'm sure we have some prior episodes that maybe we touched on it, but you definitely got to reach out to him about it because it's really incredible. Such a great way to tune in and to communicate where you actually are in terms of what drives you, what energizes you. But I want to also touch on because this is for leaders, right? These are managers of managers, and I want to come back to that point around. So that response you had was that's your individual response. I can't touch base. I remember for me because I had leaders reporting into me. Yeah, that was my personal need, and I remember feeling at such a loss. This tug of war that I kept having with myself because me acknowledging what I needed in that moment, which was a similar reaction to what you had, which was just some space, some non-attachment, some reflection time, was in conflict with how I always aspire to be with my team, with the leaders on my team, and I remember trying to re-engage in that moment, trying to call a team meeting to say, hey, this is what I've been told. This is what it means. It's been an honor to work with you, but I couldn't even muster the emotional, spiritual energy to do that. And I've always had a bit of regret around that. But I think as I'm having this conversation with you, and that's what's so powerful about life being a journey, is I'm just having kind of new insights be revealed to me from this conversation and finally some closure on this point. Because I'm starting to realize that I did the best I could at the time, and that response that I had was so normal.
It was. You gave yourself permission to be a human. Because, normally I would go, okay, if you went back, what would you do differently? But I think in this situation, that's not the right question.
Well, I would do nothing differently because I did the best that I could. And that's a really good point because I'm also big on retrospectives. It's like, I would still have done everything exactly the way they played out because I needed to experience that so that I could show up today in the version of myself that I am. That was that was a key part of what made me transition into becoming a coach. And enabled me to dive deeper into coach specific training, team specific coach training, and now be of service and support to high performing leaders through dream catchers. And so, yeah.
And I love that you brought this up because this is the other thing I wanted to jump on is leaders, managers of managers and leaders of leaders, like they're in this position where they're expected to do so much. They're expected to now set the vision and be this strong person and this person that galvanizes everybody while they themselves, I love the way you just shared, they're still suffering. They're still in this trauma. And it wasn't until you went through your journey and you actually opened my eyes, I never realized also the leaders, not just being the therapist and the coach and the performance leader, but now they have to galvanize this team. And that's such a hard thing to do when you are in this emotional, fragile state. And also looking back for myself, the only reason I was able to get through what I got through was thanks to the employer at the time gave me a coach. But a lot of leaders going through this don't have access to a coach. And what happens is when you're feeling all this shame, all this question, you go into yourself and you start trying to like figure it out, which I feel is possibly the most disastrous thing to do in that situation.
Yeah.
So what you just called out is something I'm actually seeing that a lot of leaders, I'm speaking to the leaders out there, when you're in this position where they say do more with less, I really implore you, that also means that you do not have the capacity to do all the things that you're supposed to do. So whether you claw that support internally or you claw that support externally, but please, the stuff that you can't do, find somebody who can do that to help you with it. Because that's the one thing I call on leaders to, if you're a leader, you acknowledge that you're human, then at your highest point of need, that's when you need to extend the arm and ask for help. And watching you actually show people what team coaching is, because especially now more than ever, you need to galvanize the team. And what better thing than to call somebody who's skilled at doing that? And when I see the response, when you actually come and do it, the leaders now realize, oh my God, that was amazing. Because they have so many other things to do. If you're not trained in it, how can you go and start galvanizing your team and building that team and giving them a new meaning and structure? Same as with a coach. You know, you can't, someone who's trained and listened to those conversations, at that point in time, you can't do that for yourself. So you need that support. So that's what I wanted to share.
No, I love the point you just made around kind of recognizing like you might know what you should be doing in this situation, but because you're in the center of the storm, you might benefit from getting some
Some help.
some additional help or support because you're in the center of the storm. And so, you're never going to be able to support yourself in the way that someone who's not in the center of the storm would be able to support you. So it's about kind of recognizing that, valuing that, and finding someone you connect with that's trained in that. And I think that's such an important point. One of my coach trainers in my learning journey once said that her mentor told her, the mind is like a dangerous neighborhood. Try not to go there alone.
I love that. And also, whenever I keep coming back to do less with more, do less, deliver more, do with less, do more with less. Yeah, do more with less. Whenever there's restructurings and layoffs, budget is so tight, we don't have these funds. But I really implore you to brutally and ruthlessly reprioritize, because the only way that you're going to get out of this is through you and through your leaders. So you need to start prioritizing investing in you and investing in that support. So whatever is left, don't start going for technical, you always see people, we need more technical tools or we need more this. You are the person that's going to get yourself through this. So please invest in yourself, and your leaders, you need to invest in them. So now more than ever, like when push comes to shove, to really test this out is, are you going to invest in yourself at this point in time when you need it the most?
That is a really powerful question. And just, because we both were acknowledging just recently that the fastest and most powerful way to take things to the next level is to invest in yourself. And yet, when leaders are navigating staff reductions or navigating reorgs, they're thinking about skill building. So they're going to do a training course in change management or project management or product design, whatever skill is adjacent to the work they were doing already, because they want to be able to compete for the next role. Or they're hiring a resume writer, to work with them to update their resume and revamp their resume so that they can start applying for jobs. And those are all great things to do. Absolutely. Like they're all helpful. But the one thing that is so pivotal is what's happening up here. And that is the one thing that we keep forgetting. Like it starts here. And I think that's the one thing I want to keep emphasizing in this conversation is it starts with you. It starts with your investment in yourself. Everything else is a nice to have. This is a must have. And in moments like that, when you're experiencing that sort of reorg, restructuring, or layoff, that if there's no other time when you will question whether investing in yourself is worth it, that is the one time when investing in yourself is absolutely 100% worth it because nothing else will help you to the same degree.
True words. I just hope that people, when they're in that state, when the reptilian brain is taking control, can actually see the truth in this and actually act on it. That it is a must-have. There's no two ways about it.
And I don't want I want to clarify that we talked about livelihood, right? Because we always say it's just business, it's not personal, and yet job loss, job instability directly impacts your ability to live your life.
So it's very personal.
It's not personal in that you were not directly chosen. Yeah. No one did this to you to make you suffer, but it will have serious ramifications on your personal life. And so I want to acknowledge that there are cases, of course, when you're like counting the coins and you're like, okay, I was bringing in this much before and living at a certain level. That level is still here. That's the scaffolding and the castle that I've built. So I can't go overnight and strip it down to nothing. And maybe I don't want to. And so you're really trying to be intentional about where do I spend my means, because I'm trying to give myself a longer runway to survive this. And so I totally recognize that, and everyone has to make the decision for themselves. But I'm coming back to this point of acknowledging the help that you need and starting with the mental and the emotional, because it's the thing that's usually at the bottom of the list.
Yes, you're right. Especially when the pressure is on, that goes out the window and goes to the bottom.
So you're networking, you're going to networking events and conferences, and you're
building,
you're
and finding new technology that's going to make you beat the competition.
And I'm guilty. I did all of these things.
I like the ownership. Yeah, I like it. For the first 6 or 9 months, you did all those things apart from investing in yourself.
And then like months later, I realized, oh crap, I am no better off than where I was when I started this transition. I gotta get on this. And so that's when I started to do the work.
I have a question, because this is the thing of acknowledging our humanness. What was driving you when you were doing this? And what would you say to yourself now if you could go back?
That's a deep question. Honestly, I didn't want to lose a beat. I didn't want to lose pace. I wanted to keep up, right? So it's like you've fallen off of the treadmill, and you're like, you know what? I must get back on this treadmill immediately. Like there is no question, there's no reflecting, there's no, is that the right treadmill for me? It's like, I'm going to get back on this treadmill because I was born to be on this treadmill. I thrive on this treadmill. I'm a winner. Let's do this. And I just wanted to just jump right back on it. And like in the process of jumping back on it, I lost a leg. I got blinded by one eye. My arm is hanging off, but I'm like, I'm on this, baby. Let's do this,
So, one-legged, one-eyed, but still running on the treadmill.
Full pelt. Full pelt. Like I'm Serena Williams training for Wimbledon. Like I was like gunning it with one leg, just hopping. And at the end of the day, what did I accomplish? That's the thing that I think I keep coming back. It's like, it's this false sense of progress. And really at the core of it was this identity question of like, I just was so wrapped up in my sense of what I deliver, how I solve problems, how I help others, that if I'm not in a position where I can use my gifts and skills to solve problems and help others, then what is my value?
What is my value? That's a tough one. Thank you so much for being so raw and honest. And what would you go back to say to yourself now?
Your value is infinite, and it has nothing to do with what you produce.
Wow. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. Wow, I didn't know that was I think this is a great place to wrap this up, but we have another episode on this topic coming up, and we're going to dive into, we've been talking about the leader. What can the leader do for the leaders they're leading? But now I want to look at the system at the organizational level. What's happening with all this chaos and this layoffs? So that's what we're going to dive into next time. I hope this was really insightful for people, and we want you guys to show up at the breakfast event, because we really want to dive deeper into this conversation, and we want to learn from everyone who comes in. And I think collectively we can really come up with something amazing to what it means to thrive in chaos. So
I love that. And I just want to note that you'll notice we didn't dive into solutions, practical, actionable strategies, because too often we skip ahead, right? It's like fast forward, get to the solution. What is so important is acknowledging these foundational pieces, because these are the pieces that are least understood, but have the greatest impact in terms of influencing and controlling how you behave and what your mindset is and how you interact. And so that's why we're focusing on this. In our breakfast event, we will be diving into practical strategies, the more sort of consensus reality part of this equation. But we wanted to leave you with this thought leadership here so that you can reflect on it and start to ask these questions of yourself and start to note what's coming up for you in your own life.
Till next time, we will see you guys soon. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of another insightful episode of Real Talk. We hope you've enjoyed today's discussion and have gained valuable insights into enhancing your mental well-being and productivity. Now, before we wrap things up, we have an exciting opportunity for you. Are you curious about your mental fitness score? Want to know how you can improve your overall well-being and boost your productivity? Well, we have just the thing for you. Head over to our show notes, where you will find a link to our exclusive mental fitness quiz. It's a quick and easy assessment that will provide you with a personalized score and actionable steps to enhance your general well-being and productivity. It's like having a personal coach in your pocket. And don't forget to subscribe to Real Talk on your favorite podcast platform. By subscribing, you'll be the first to know when we release new episodes filled with valuable discussions, expert interviews, and practical tips for leading a fulfilling life. You can also connect with me, Chinazom, on social media. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook for daily inspirations, updates on upcoming episodes, and behind-the-scenes peeks into the Real Talk community. Remember, your mental well-being matters, and taking small steps towards improvement can make a significant difference in your life. We're here to support you on your journey. Thank you for tuning in today, and a special thank you to all our listeners who have joined us on this incredible podcasting adventure. Your support means the world to us. Until next time, keep striving for a better version of yourself. Take care and stay mentally fit.